This is Long Shots, VSiN's premier golf betting podcast. Here's Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelley Bydlon.
It is Long Shots here on VSiN and DraftKings Network. Matt Brown, Kelley Bydlon, Wes Reynolds coming to you. We will certainly talk the 3M Open before we get out of here. But guys, we are coming off the final major of the year. It's a little bit of a interesting week for me because I feel like a little deflated because there's no big tournament left until we start to get into the playoffs. And we have these tournaments here where basically people are chasing those points to try to get in to the playoffs over the next few weeks. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to try to find ways to make you guys some money somewhere along the way here. But let's talk a little bit about the Open Championship. I know you guys talked a little bit about it yesterday, but if you didn't catch the Monday edition of the podcast, which by the way, why didn't you? Go ahead, subscribe. It's absolutely free. You just smash the button over there for Long Shots. You definitely should do that. But let's talk a little bit about all of that. I mean, for me, it was a little bit of a losing tournament for me. I said I was going to go heavy against Cam Smith and head-to-heads. Thank God Ricky Fowler hits a bomb on 18 on the 72nd hole to beat Cam Smith, or the tournament would have been a pretty big disaster for me. Brian Harman wins by 6 strokes. And, Wes, when you take a look, I mean, look, Brian Harman was not even anywhere on my radar. He was not anywhere in any sort of consideration whatsoever for me. There was no way I was ever going to get on him. And then once he had the huge lead, there was no way I was ever going to back him in that situation. So there was just no way for me to come out of anything, from an in-game perspective in this tournament at all. Did he just kind of sneak up on us, or are we just looking at one of those things where, look, man, golf is weird and sometimes weird things happen in golf?
Probably a little bit of both, actually, because he did have some good form coming in. Had that second at the Travelers, had a couple top tens, and that's what Brian Harman has done basically his whole career. He had 2 previous PGA Tour wins. The last one was 2017 at the Wells Fargo, so it was like 2,258 days since he had won on the PGA Tour. But that's who Brian Harman is. Like, he's always a guy that gets a few top tens a year. In fact, I think before he won the Open and before he won the Claret Jug on Sunday, I believe he had 29 top 10 finishes without a win going back to the 2017-2018 season. Coincidentally enough, number 2 and now number 1, Tommy Fleetwood with 27, who was in the final pairing with him on Saturday. And Saturday, I think, is kind of when you knew, okay, this guy's going to win this thing because he's paired with Tommy Fleetwood. The whole crowd is with Tommy Fleetwood. He's a local, lived in Merseyside or from Merseyside County. And Harman, leaked a little. I think he was like 2 over through 4 on Saturday, also 2 over through 5 on Sunday. And then he'd respond with a birdie and just putted great. 11.57 strokes gained on the field. That was number 1 by far for the tournament. And this is just a guy that probably did sneak up on us. And sometimes you get a weird result, and you get those weird results at the Open. What was I think 150 to 1. I think that was like the market average of where he was to start the week. But credit to him, man. The guy in the crowd heckled him a little bit. It's like, you don't have the stones for this, Harman. And he showed that he did. Now his world has changed. He's in the majors the next 5 years. He's a lock for the Ryder Cup team. He's number 10 in the world. Brian Harman, number 10 in the official world golf rankings. But look, he deserved it. And he had some, chasers or guys on the leaderboard. You see John Rahm there, Rory McIlroy, Jason Day, Sepp Straka, and Emiliano Grillo had good form coming in. Both had wins during the calendar year. But Brian Harman never let up. I got to give him credit.
Yeah, I mean, Wes, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, and Matt, you kind of hit on it. From an in-game betting perspective, it was tough because you're not talking about and Wes, I'm glad you called this out yesterday. You're not talking about a journeyman when you talk about Brian Harman golf-wise. He's been a staple on the PGA Tour for a long time, a really solid player. And when we broke down what we were looking for in a golfer at the Open last week, he really checked all the boxes. I mean, we were looking for guys who are accurate off the tee, who are going to have good scrambling and around the green games in case they got in those situations. And he was great when he got in those situations, and he putted well. And it's just, he checked all those boxes, but he was so far off our radars of golfers that we'd be considering who checked those boxes.
He had never really been, except for the one time, 2017 at Erin Hills at the U.S. Open. Remember, he was the 54-hole leader. Brooks Koepka ends up winning that by 4 shots. So he hadn't really been in this position a lot. But like you said, Kelley, a good, stable PGA Tour player always stays on the tour, gets enough top tens, cashes enough checks. So, a very good player that had the moment of his career this weekend.
Yeah, like Matt, like people were, I'm sure people were asking you, and people are texting and tweeting me on Saturday, Sunday, like, hey, who do we jump in on here? And I'm like, I'm going to give Harman the respect that there's nobody to jump in on.
That was basically my response to everyone. Listen, I'm looking very hard to get in tournament in every single tournament that we bet, but this one did not present any opportunity really whatsoever because as the lead that he had gotten and the way that the course was playing, yeah, there were a couple of guys here and there who had low rounds throughout the course, but it was not like a course where everyone was going low. That was just not the case, and it was not a case where two people had to go that you expected someone to go low 2 rounds in a row, which is kind of what you needed to happen for anyone to run him down. And so, sometimes you just have to say this is going to be a losing tournament. For if you only bet outrights or however it is, or you look and. In my situation, you get a miracle putt on the 72nd hole by Ricky Fowler. Thank you, Ricky Fowler. Appreciate that to make this not a complete disaster for me this week. But it was a loser, and sometimes you're just going to lose. It's very hard to win every single week whenever we're betting these things the way we are.
I think that brings us back, though, to a topic that we often hit on this show. It's if you're only betting outrights, yeah, that's probably a boring tournament, a boring finish for you, and a costly tournament. I had a very active Sunday. I'm sweating out a ton of top 20 finishes at 6:30 in the morning our time, as that stuff's going on. I think this is another thing where the coverage irritated me a bit, right? Where all you're showing the final round was Harman and then the 6 guys that are all tied at 6 strokes behind them. I'm like, can we show some other guys? Show these guys when one of them's 3 or 4 back, right? Like, come on, let's mix up this stuff. There's more people that are betting on this now and betting different things. One of the things you and I often talk about is, well, man, they were barely mentioned. I don't know if they ever mentioned us, but maybe they did. The money factor, right? Like the difference in these 6 guys or whatever it ended up being, 7 guys that are within 1 stroke of each other, 6 guys. Like, there's a $500,000 difference in those two. And places.
Also the guys that had to get into the top 10 to qualify for next year. Matthew Jordan, who, by the way, was a big story, being that he's a member of that club. He gets in the Open next year. Shubhankar Sharma. These are guys that aren't going to get in on, their world ranking points. So this, matters to them to get into the top 10. But, yeah, when you're talking about jumping in, in terms of in-play, there wasn't a lot of opportunity this weekend because I was just looking. I was like, could Rory McIlroy come back and win? Sure, but he's 9 shots back and he's 10-1.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bet that.
Yeah, zero value really from any standpoint when it came to all that. And Wes, just one thing that also comes out of this. We're looking at a Ryder Cup situation now where you have Justin Thomas play poorly yet again, and you now have these other names that are getting thrown out. Sam Burns on the outside looking in right now, but I don't think even arguably has been more consistent than Justin Thomas has over the course of the season. Now, he didn't make the cut in this tournament, did fare pretty well the week before in the Scottish, and of course does have a win on tour this year in the match play for the Ryder Cup. So there are some interesting decisions to be made along the way. And listen, Justin Thomas, one of the most popular players on tour, one of the people that people actually tune in to watch, great social media presence, which I know, listen, these are all the things that do play into these decisions, right? And I think there's going to be a lot of discussion here over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, really on both sides. Because if you look, you have 3 guys that are now locks to make the Ryder Cup team that at the start of the year you didn't think were going to be on the team. Brooks Koepka, Wyndham Clark, Brian Harman. Yeah. They are now locks on points because they take the top 6 for USA on points, and then Zach Johnson has 6 captain's picks. Same with Team Europe, but I'll stick with USA for a moment. Like Schauffele and Cantlay and Scheffler are obviously locks to go along with that. But then you go down, and it's like you could make a case, Morikawa and Spieth, who I think will be on the team. But what about Keegan Bradley? What about Ricky Fowler? They have played some of the best golf that they've played in the last several years. So you've got Justin Thomas and you've got Tony Finau that are not 100% locks. I think Team Europe might be starting to take shape. I think Sepp Straka made a very convincing case over the last few weeks. He's going to be on. I think Robert McIntyre is going to be on. And then you've got 2 at the back end, maybe Adrian Meronk, who won on that course over in Rome earlier this year. But they've got a pretty solid core 8 of veterans on Team Europe. So you're starting to see that price drop a little bit.
I was just going to ask you, Wes, do you know what it was before?
I think it was over $2.
I think it was approaching 3 at one point.
Yeah.
At one point, it was approaching 3.
I mean, because if 4 months ago, we're sitting here and we would have said that's an appropriate price.
Back up the Brinks truck. Yeah, and bet on
because
USA.
They have so many guys guys because this is a changing of the guard for Europe, of course, with a lot of the older players, save for Justin Rose, that are now playing on Live. And those guys, quite frankly, haven't played well enough anyway. The Martin Keimers and the Ian Poulters and the Lee Westwoods. They're not good enough anymore, so they got to go with the youth movement. So that's where you bring in the Moronks and you bring in the Rasmus and Nikolai Højgaard, who are both, I think, in the mix for this. And you're going to have some rookies on this team. Justin Rose emerging gives them another veteran, I think, on the team.
I think that for the U.S. side, though, you can make so where we sat 4 months ago, you could have said, the European team in that time frame has now maybe gotten a little bit better because I think some of those guys like Sepp Straka have put together some solid golf. But Brian Harman might have just won the Open Championship. Brian Harman doesn't make the U.S. Ryder Cup.
I tell you, we got a lot of different opinions about the different courses this year over the 4 majors. But I think when everything was all said and done and everything played out, and you take a look, only 8 players played all 4 majors at under par. And if that tells you, aggregate, right? Like of their aggregate score, only 8 players played the 4 in an aggregate under par. And so, yeah, sure, some of these courses fit some of these other players better than others, and there were guys that shot under. But I think at the end of the day, listen, some people shot really well. There was a lot of people who were over par. There was a lot of people who were right at around par. And when it's all said and done, I think we got out of this major season what was set out to be. And I know people were going to argue that, this course setup is this way, and we should have done this and should have done that. But Wes, I think at the end of the day, it kind of proves if only 8 guys are aggregate under par, then it did its job.
I think all 4 majors were won by the deserved champions. Look, Rory McIlroy's going to kick himself for letting that U.S. Open get away out in L.A. But and Rory McIlroy, by the way, that drought is now 9 years in major championships.
We will talk the 3M Open. Not a star-studded event, but maybe that will provide us some value somewhere along the way. We will give you what the stats are that we put into our models, and of course, we will give you our full outright cards as well. When we come back, it's Long Shots here on VSiN DraftKings Network.
This is Long Shots, VSiN's premier golf betting podcast. Here's Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelley Bydlon.
The NFL betting guide is out now, and our college football betting guide is coming in just a couple weeks. Only VSiN Pro subscribers get all the tools to prep for the college and NFL seasons. Our experts provide profiles of every team with advanced stats and power ratings, plus best bets on futures and season win totals. If you sign up before the end of July, and as you can see, today's the 25th, the end of July, you actually get this all for $175 all the way through the end of the Super Bowl. Or if you want to just kind of dip a toe in, 30 days, $19 to see everything we got over at VSiN. Again, this ends July the 31st, so don't miss out on these preseason deals. VSiN.com/subscribe. It is the 3M Open edition, and as well as the Open Championship Review edition of Long Shots. Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelley Bydlon on the desk. And let's go ahead and switch here to the 3M Open. We mentioned right off the top, this is not a star-studded field. We do have Tony Finau, Sung J M, Cam Young, Hideki Matsuyama, but that's about it as far as like the actual big-time stars. If you want to throw Justin Thomas in there, of course, he is a star, but not playing very well like a star right now, not playing like a star at all. Tony Finau is your betting favorite over at DraftKings. Actually, a co-favorite with Sung J M and Cam Young. Now, these are 3 different guys that have toggled all over the place over the last 48 hours as far as as far as who's betting favorite. I've seen Cam Young, I've seen Sung J, I've seen Tony Finau, and now here they all are 3 as betting favorites. 18-1 on Hideki Matsuyama, 22 on Sepp Straka, and Wes, as you mentioned in the first segment, Sepp Straka playing some really good golf. Emiliano Grillo sitting at 25-1. Ludwig Aberg, 28-1. Justin Thomas, yes, is behind everybody that we just mentioned. He's also sitting 28-1. Cam Davis at 30. Everybody else 35 or longer. We will certainly talk about some of those people that are 35 or longer as we get into this, because I only have one guy that is actually shorter than 35-1 on my card so far. Just 5 outrights for me. Probably will add 1 or 2 more depending on any of the price drifts that happen to occur here over the next little bit. But do want to start, Wes, with you and what just what you saw in this course, what we're kind of looking at here as we head right outside of Minneapolis.
Yeah, it's a par 71, 74, 31, one of the longer courses on the PGA Tour, but this is played at elevation. It's an Arnold Palmer design originally, designed back in 2000. So it's a gettable course. There is some danger lurking, though, if you really look around. The par 3s and the par 4s are actually pretty easy from a scoring perspective. There are 5 holes on the property which do not have an average of under par. One is the longest par 3, and then a couple of the par 5s they're right around 600 yards. I think they're about 590, 595. And they're challenging because there's a lot of water on this course. There's 27 water hazards in play over 13 holes. It kind of looks like, if you really look at the course and like take kind of the sky map version of it, it looks like it's in a gated community in Florida. Basically, there's a bunch of homes surrounding it. In terms of the way it's designed, it's bent grass pretty much throughout. It played a little tougher last year because they did grow the rough out to about 4 inches, bluegrass fescue in the rough. Greens are large, 6,700 square feet, roll about 12, average on the stimp meter. Not a lot of contours on these greens at all, and they are pure bent grass. So you've seen the winning scores in the past. 17 under last year for Finau, 15 under for Champ the year before, 19 under, 21 under. So it has played a little bit tougher. And, you know, they basically said, the tournament organizers, we want birdies, but we also want train wrecks. You know, we want the water to be in play, and the water is in play on that par 5 18th, which can absolutely switch. The water's not only in play off the tee, but also on your approach shot if you're going for it in 2. So 72 bunkers on the course, so that's about average. But you would expect like high teens, maybe around 20 under par is going to be the winner here.
Yeah, Kelley, if you take a look at the course setup and basically the way that it's played, to go along with what the tournament organizer said there about birdies and train wrecks, you can see that a lot of the holes do have a higher than average birdie rate, but then they also have a higher than average bogey rate as well, right? So it kind of plays like, if you can avoid hitting it into trouble, then you can play this hole at under par. But if you hit trouble, things could get really, really bad for you. And so that was an interesting way in trying to wrap your mind around the type of player you'd be wanting this week, what stats that mattered to you this type of week. I think this course is pretty interesting. It's not like the typical TPC course, in my opinion, that we've seen kind of on tour. I like it as well.
I think it's harder than Deer Run, which is where the John Deere was.
If you take a look at kind of the flyovers, like you're talking about, Wes, like I thought this thing's going to look pretty interesting. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting a course. Wes, you brought it up. So, you know, we've only seen this tournament for 4 years, right? So they've been, I think, a lot of new tournaments. They're doing with what a lot of new tournaments do, right? If it's playing too easy, how do we toughen this up a bit? In those first couple of years, they're really relying on the wind that they get in this area to be a factor. Those first couple of years, they weren't very windy. You saw some low scoring. Okay, you got a little bit more wind the past couple of years, and they grow that rough out. Okay, that makes it a little bit tougher course. And then with as much water as you have, then you get that obviously the penalty areas that you're going to be dealing with both off the tee, on approach, kind of everywhere here. So I think it makes it really, that combined with the actual length of the course, it makes it a little bit of a unique course for really what we see in the normal rotation on the PGA Tour. So, yeah, I'm excited. It was a little bit kind of different, different modeling as far as what we were looking at this week. And I always like it when we have to dive into something different, you know?
Yeah, we got a handy-dandy little weather forecast for you if you are watching over on VSiN and DraftKings Network. And it basically is letting us know that it could be some rain there on Thursday, but outside of that, going to be fine. And really what it comes down to, what we will be watching, and we are sitting here doing this on a Tuesday, we always say wait until the very last minute if you're looking at if there's any sort of wave advantage with anything, is does that wind forecast change at all? Because it does look like it's going to be pretty steady throughout the course of the day. We're just kind of in that 10 to 12-ish, and then, we'll get the gusts. And if that's the case, not going to be that big of a deal. But if now we get into the more consistent 15 miles an hour, and now the gusts get up into the, into those lower 20s to mid-20s, now, Wes, we're looking at this water coming into play far more often, right? And maybe we're having to see guys try and change their ball flight and all of that, in which, again, maybe some of the few players that did make the trip over from across the sea, they've been practicing on different ball flights and whatnot, but we might even have to see some of that. And so it could get a little bit more interesting depending on that wind situation.
Yeah, and look, that's why I included both birdie or better gained and also bogey avoidance here. And you wouldn't think you would be including that necessarily with what looks like a birdie fest, but I think this is going to play a little bit tougher, and Detroit clearly did for the Rocket Mortgage, and what Deer Run did for the John Deere. So this is a little bit more of a challenge, even though there's some correlation you could certainly use for those courses, because those are both Midwest courses played in the summer.
So because I have a little cheat sheet here and I can see everybody's outrights, we did not end up on Finau, did not end up on Sungjae, did not end up on Cam Young. For me, not necessarily anything against those guys necessarily. Look, Finau's form, Sung Jae's form, Cameron Young, of course, bounces back this past week over the Open Championship a little bit. But those numbers, with the way these guys have been playing, at least over the longer sample size than just the last couple of weeks, I just wasn't too incredibly interested in them. Again, it's just the price really is what it came down to for me.
Yeah, me too. I think that we've seen a drift in Finau's number appropriately. The game right now is just not there for him.
Kind of a shell of what we've seen of Tony Finau actually lately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sung Jae and Cameron Young, I don't want to take anything away from them because actually they're, those are guys that have gone through a lot of troubles this year that actually maybe are starting to put some things back together over the past few times that we've seen them out. So maybe they belong up there. I know Matt's using his cheat sheet. Yes, I do have a bet on Hideki Matsuyama. But a lot of that goes into it, right? When you look at the top of the board, and I think the top of the board's pretty weak, except for one guy, well, then I'm getting more value out of that 18 to 1, in my opinion. So a little tease ahead, I did bet Decky. I'll go over all the bets then. But yeah, I think when you're examining that area, that's how you have to look at it.
Well, if you talk about form, I mean, like Sepp Straka's right there with these names as well. And certainly of those guys, by far the most, as far as long-term form, his has been the best of these guys. It's just hard for me. Again, I respect Sepp Straka's game. I like Sepp Straka as a player. For him to be the fifth guy on the odds board for getting 22 to 1 on a guy like that, it's just tough for me to pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think so too. And plus the fact that a lot of recency bias, I think, is in those numbers because everybody saw that they were in the top 10 at the Open Championship. So it's like, oh, they're going to carry it over. And sometimes you don't want to get too much into recent form. You got to do a little bit of a mixture. But one note on Justin Thomas here. There's a reason why Justin Thomas is in the 3M Open. There's a reason why he committed to the Wyndham next week, because he's outside the top 70 in the FedEx Cup. Keep in mind that has changed this year. It's not the top 125. It's the top 70 that start the FedEx Cup playoff. So like the Justin Thomases, the Keith Mitchells, Joel Damon, Justin Suh, they're kind of like the bubble boys right now that are like right at 70 or just outside the top 70. So there's a reason why he is here this week.
Yeah, it is super interesting, though, because there are some names where in a tournament like this that, yes, there are going to be some bogeys. There are going to be some guys that hit the water. But outside of that, if you can kind of keep it in play, if you got a little bit of distance, and certainly we'll talk about how important it seems that approach is here on this course as well, I think there's a lot of guys in this field that can score. There are some scorers, right? They're just guys that don't typically, that just aren't a whole lot of win equity in these fields that have all these other top players. I think there are some guys a little bit further down the board that will be super interesting, and I bet you they made some of our cards somewhere along the way. We will talk about what exactly went into our modeling, what did the models spit out, and did that actually influence us in getting those players on our cards? When we come back, it's Long Shots here on DraftKings and VSiN.
This is Long Shots, VSiN's premier golf betting podcast. Here's Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelley Bydlon.
Want to get in on the fantasy action, but sick of managing your roster? You sick of injuries ending your season? Well, Best Ball and DraftKings puts the best team on the field all season long, and you can play for $10 million in guaranteed cash prizes this year. For a limited time, you can join DraftKings' largest best ball contest ever and get your first entry back in DraftKings dollars as soon as the draft is finished. Act now before this expires. Playing best ball, download the DraftKings app, use code BESTBETS, and enter DraftKings Best Ball Millionaire Contest and snake draft your team for the season. Each week, automatically rack up points from your top scorers. You don't have to add, drop, trade, or I should have played him. None of that stuff. Whoever scores the highest at those positions are automatically entered into your lineup. If you have a gambling problem, 1-800-GAMBLER. One per customer. Opt-in required. $10 entry fee. Bonus issued at $10,000. Age and eligibility restrictions do apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com/promotions for details. That is code BESTBETS. Basically, you draft a team and then you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the season. That was a very long way of saying you draft a team and you don't have to worry about it the rest of the season. Whoever scores the most points at the position gets automatically entered into your lineup.
Guess what?
That's what happens.
The only way I'm interested in playing fantasy anymore is doing that, because then when I forget
Yes.
about it once a week, Matt, it's not going to burn
You
me.
don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about turning down absurd trades. Like you don't have to worry about like adding waiver wire and whatever else. No, it just doesn't have the best score. Boom, in the lineup. There we go. Move on. All right, guys. So 3M Open models. If you have not followed us, if it's your first time catching us here on Long Shots, all three of us use various modeling forms. We go in and no, we're not coders. We're using somebody else's code to do the models and stuff. We go in and we take the stats that we think matter. We weight those accordingly, which is why we do come up with different kind of answers to the test here. And we take that and compare it to the odds that are available out there, and we decide if there's any value on any of these players. And so, Kelley, as you were throwing things together this week, the stats that mattered to you, what did you weigh more heavily than what you think the public did? And is there anything that you kind of were off of that the public was on?
Yeah, I found it interesting that even though we're talking an very, very, very different golf course from last week, a lot of the model looking a lot the same, because I think that off the tee play here is going to be crucial. We've talked about it's the 10th longest course on the tour, so distance is going to help you here where you can get it. I also think with all the penalty areas we're talking about this week, the hazards, water hazards, that accuracy is extremely important off the tee again this week. So really, stroke gain off the tee, did do some driving distance and a really heavy percentage of good drives gain. Won a good approach shot heading into the green. Put these guys putting themselves in good position to do that. So a lot of off the tee for me. And, a lot on approach. A lot of approach. Opportunities gained is where I really looked at. Looked at strokes gained par 4 and par 5s. Really, we got some scoreable par 5s here. Like Wes said before, we got a couple really long ones. So look at 550 to 600 on the par 5s. But looked at those. Plugged in the par 3, 200, 225 a bit, because we do have two of those that fall in that category. And then some birdie or better gain, really just looking for, those guys that can get out there and go low here in the tournament. That was pretty much it. A little bit simpler model for me this week, but I think it still kind of stands from what, really what I entered last weekend, where I'm either looking for guys that are long off the tee or good with long iron play. And definitely different results for what I found model-wise and what I actually wanted to bet this week. We talk about this sometimes, Matt, where you plug all that stuff in the model, and what really sticks out to you are the guys that aren't long off the tee that are still ranking up there high on your model. And that's where I ended up going with a lot of week. I'll get to that when I get to my picks. But I think it's still kind of like last week. You need to have one of those skill sets. Either you're going to be long off the tee or you can hit those long irons well, because you're going to still have these long par 5s and some lengthy par 4s as well.
Yeah, a lot of the same with me, Wes. I was looking here off the tee very heavily for me this week. And the good drives, obviously, the perfect player here is the person that is long and accurate, but right, and certainly like a combination of both. But I was trying to get a differentiator between the two, and I wanted to definitely get some accuracy in there to go along with some of the length. And I think what you were describing in the course breakdown is kind of the same thing that I saw, Wes, which is, listen, as long as you're not spraying it, you're going to be fine, which is why I think good drives as opposed to just straight driving accuracy was maybe more important to me this week than it was, because I'm like, listen, if you're a few yards off, it's not going to be incredibly penal to you. Now, if you do spray, you're going to end up in the water, or you're going to end up in some worse stuff. So I'm okay with the dudes that are barely missing the fairway. So that was a pretty heavy, at least one of the approaches for me this week.
Yeah, look. A lot of the same. I went a little heavier on approach than off the tee. I used approach, a couple of the proximity pockets, 175 to 200, 200 plus, because, this is over a 7,400-yard course, even though it's not going to play as long as the listed yardage because of the elevation. I used SGOTT, strokes gained off the tee, some good drives gained as well. You could kind of combine that with driving accuracy, if you will. If you look at those, there's a lot of carryover and a lot of similarities in those two numbers. Birdie or better gain and also bogey avoidance, to kind of counteract each other. Strokes gained par 5s. Those par 5s are all close to 600 yards, so they're not necessarily gimme birdies. You should birdie them if you don't get in the hazard. And like you were saying, Matt, it's more important to stay out of the H2O than it is out of the rough. You could still, even though this is 4 inches high rough, you could still hack it out of there and get pretty close. I used a very small stroke, just for context, strokes gained putting on bent grass, just to kind of see who the hot putters were, and it's the usual suspects that are there every week. And then I'm trying to do like a little comp course thing. Like when I talk about the correlated courses, I just mix them all, and this is something very small. So when I looked at like the comp courses that I thought were comparable, a lot of the TPC courses, Deer Run, a little bit of River Highlands, Sawgrass, PGA National, where the Honda Classic is played, PGA West. I also put it in that Detroit Golf Club. I put in a few, and they're listed in my column that'll be up at VSiN.com later this Tuesday afternoon. But what I came up with was just, I was looking more of like the average, because some guys have played more rounds than others. Like if you noticed, one guy that we mentioned earlier, like Ludwig Aberg, has not played, if you're doing a 36-round model, he has not played 36 rounds on the PGA Tour. Peter Quest has also not played that. And those are guys that appeared in some of these stats. So that's something you want to keep in context when you're looking at this stuff. So like when I did the comp course thing, I did total strokes gained on average per round, because some guys have played more rounds than others on all these correlated courses.
Yeah, it was, listen, we did go about modeling, I think, a little bit differently this week, which again is something which is why it's good for us to get in and kind of talk through all this to get everyone's thoughts. I did some par 5 stuff in here, even though there's only 3 par 5s. I know that they are critical for people to score on those, and so I did throw that stuff in. I did pretty heavily on opportunities as well, because with these greens as big as they are, right, you're going to be hitting greens. I did absolutely nothing around the green. I did no scrambling, no nothing, no any of that stuff, because if you're not hitting these greens, then something's wrong. Right? I mean, there's massive greens. I want the dudes that are hitting these greens and putting it at least pretty close. I don't care if you're hitting the green, but you've got a 70-foot putt. Like, I'm not really worried about that, right? I'm looking for these guys that have these 15-foot and in looks, and so I was pretty heavy on that, and I think it actually swayed kind of the results of my model as well for these dudes that are getting it fairly close with some of these different buckets that I was looking at as well.
I think it's a great stat, Matt. I've brought that up a few times. I think anytime we're dealing with average or above average green size, I think it's something you got to include, just because, great. If your green in regulation doesn't do anything for you there.
Listen, if I can get a green in regulation, I don't really care, right? I'm not worried about that. That's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about these guys putting it a little bit closer.
Put it close.
Yes. They should be able to green in regulation. I'm worried about putting it a little bit close, right? I'm not sitting there going like, I'm going, well, man, I'm really praying to 3-putt this thing. Like, that's going to be what I'm looking at. So, Wes, let's get started here, at least with your bets that you have in there, and we'll carry it over into the next segment.
Yeah, and like I said, a little bit heavier on approach this week than even off the tee. Gary Woodland at 40-1. Been playing some pretty consistent golf. He's making cuts. I know he kind of went off the grid a little bit, had some injuries, but if you look at Gary Woodland, I think he has made now like his last 5 cuts over the summer. Nothing yet in the top 10, but downfield this year, I feel that he could be a pretty solid ball striker here. He's 11th here in 2021. Aaron Rye didn't get the 50, but I've been betting him a lot this summer. If you look at approach and you look at good drives gained, you look at accuracy, he is at the top of the list. So Aaron Rye trying to maybe make his case for one of those potentially final 2 Ryder Cup spots for Team Europe. Lucas Glover popped everywhere, and a lot of that was because of recent form, because if you look 5th, 6th, and 4th, his last 3 starts. So Lucas Glover, Eric Cole, guy that's played well all year, first time playing here, 55-1. Austin Eckroat, who's had a couple top 10s this summer at 55-1. Nikolai Højgaard, going with the Dane here. That's a guy that's in the mix for the Ryder Cup, 60-1. He has drifted to. And then Garrick Higo, 80-1. Guy that kind of showed some form, was in the mix at the John Deere Classic, slipped a little bit on Sunday to finish just outside the top 20. And then Ches Reavie is my long shot at 110-1. Really up there on approach, really up there on accuracy and good drives gained. So I thought that was a pretty fair price over a guy that's been making cuts all summer.
Yeah, very interested to talk through your card with you. And for all those people out there that say that we end up on the same players each and every week, I have a couple on your card, and I have a couple that I thought were actually big fades. And so guess what? We do have differing opinions here on Long Shot. Shocking that actually comes out whenever we do that. Mine and Kelly's card here on the other side.
This is Long Shots, VSiN's premier golf betting podcast. Here's Matt Brown, Wes Reynolds, and Kelley Bydlon.
Become a VSiN Pro subscriber today. Get a daily email recapping all the best bets from our show hosts and guests. You can get all this over at VSiN.com/picks. You can search by sport, matchup, event date, and more. You can get the top experts leaderboard, which shows the betting records, profit, and ROI. See who's got the hot hand over there. You can get pro picks, betting splits, power ratings, plus 24/7 video access if you become a VSiN Pro subscriber today. Just $19. VSiN.com/subscribe. Or the $175 for the until the end of the Super Bowl.
Do that.
Yeah, do that instead.
Get everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everything.
Don't know why we're telling them that. We should just do the 175.
You get everything, including long shots, the original long shots, by the way. Don't settle for any cheap imitations.
Not saying who may or may not be, but I'm just saying it's out there. Wes, we had to get through yours a little quick, but just a couple of context on a couple of your plays here, because I was looking. Listen, I do share Lucas Glover and Austin Eckroat with you, so I do have that. I will say this on Garrick Higo. So he was popping for me from a off the tee standpoint, but good gracious, his approach game has been absolutely atrocious. Losing multiple strokes per round, except for this past week. And so that was actually what got me off of him. I kind of thought I was going to end up on him until I saw that, and then it just scared me away a little bit.
Yeah, the stats aren't pretty on the South African, but what I kind of went with, where I gave him a little bit of a nudge here, is because the form's getting, at least the short-term form, is getting progressively better. 33rd, 21st, 19th over at the Scottish Open. Did not play last week, but off the tee, obviously, the guy's a bomber. He has won on the PGA Tour before at that championship at Congaree down in South Carolina, that one-off event during the COVID season. But Higo was one of my longer shots. You mentioned Eckroat, top 10 at the U.S. Open, 4th tee to green out there at the LA Country Club. And he putts the best on bent grass. Like, some guys are Bermuda guys, some guys are bent grass guys, some guys it doesn't matter. But with Austin Eckroat, first at the Byron Nelson in putting. Remember, he was right in the mix there for the win that Jason Day eventually got. And then 7th at the Travelers just a little bit less than a month ago. So I think he could putt well here. The Glover form just goes without saying. 4th at the Rocket Mortgage, 6th at the John Deere, 5th at the Barbasol. So, sometimes you just got to ride with the guy that's got good incoming form on very similar courses.
Yeah, with Eckroat, and the reason he ended up making my card, inside the top 40 in this field, in nearly every single category that I plugged into the model this week, right? This is a guy that, again, maybe not a familiar name for people who don't follow week in, week out, kind of like Eric Cole that you just mentioned on your card, but these are dudes that have been playing pretty consistent golf, and then if you look at the underlying stats, do they have the firepower to compete when this is a full field event? Kelley, probably not, right? But whenever you take a look at them in a field such as this, and specifically when the big names at the top are actually guys that aren't in very good form and haven't been playing very well, I think this is the type of tournament that is perfect for one of those guys to kind of get that signature win for them. Yeah, and I like the top 40 play on him too. I think especially when we're talking about Eckroat, you're talking about a guy that, a month ago, all three of us probably had bets in, in a couple of different tournaments. And just because we're at the time of year that we are in the golf calendar, he's just a guy who hasn't played a lot of the events recently. So I think there's a little bit of, you're not seeing him, so you kind of forget about him. But go back and check what he's really done this year. This has been one of the more impressive surprise golfers of the year. So let's go ahead to you, where you do have 3 outrights in right now. You mentioned Hideki Matsuyama, so you did play one of the guys at the top of the board. Yeah, I did go with Hideki. I think just when you compare the rest of the top of that board, he's he's someone I played at the Open Championship, as Wes was talking about. With Higo, Hideki, you just keep seeing that form continue to get better and better and better. Recent results: T3 13 at the Open. Yes, he missed the cut of the Rocket Mortgage Classic, but T13 of the Travelers, T32 at the U.S. Open. Go back and look last 36 rounds when we're talking about what I'm focusing on in this tournament. Good drives, he's ranked 3rd in this field. On approach, 2nd. Opportunities gained 1st, right? So that's really tying in everything that I'm looking for off the tee and on approach here. He's not the longest guy off the tee, but he can hit those long irons well. So 18-1, it's a short number, but this field, I think when we're looking at the entirety of it, both at the top, I think he's the best when we talk those top guys on the board. And then, Matt, you kind of brought this up like first segment, but there are some guys that I bet, and I'll get to in a second, but I think the outright prices are a little bit egregious on in those 20s and stuff like that. I just couldn't get to. So
Hideki 18-1, and then we talked about these two guys right away yesterday, Wes, when we did the first pod. But numbers that jumped out to me that I knew, at least some of the stats I was going to be plugging in the model, who we're going to pop. I knew I thought Aaron Rye and Eric Cole would. Aaron Rye definitely popped. Eric Cole didn't as much. Digging into the numbers, yeah, he's had some accuracy troubles off the tee recently, so that was a little bit of a concern. But I put both those outright bets in yesterday, so was able to get that 50 on Aaron Rye, 55 on Eric Cole. Didn't do anything more additionally with Eric Cole, but as you'll see, that should be top 20, not top 40. Top 20 on Hideki Matsuyama, top 20 on Emiliano Grillo. We've seen him have great success at this course before. You guys know I can't quit Grillo anyways, even though he did bite into my Tommy Fleetwood first-round leader earnings last week. I just had to laugh at that because it had to be him, of course. Aaron Rye, plus 185, so backing up that outright with the top 20 there. Doug Gim, another guy I think we kind of forgot about. Matt, you and I think we're both on him about a month ago, too. Haven't really seen much of him, but, he's popping in the models. So played top 20 on him, plus 225. And then Lucas Glover, I got close to going outright on him, but I just stayed with the top 20 bet at plus 275. The tournament matchups, Decky over Sungjae. Just thought this was mispriced. Even money. They had Sungjae as the favorite. Doug Gim over Adam Svensson, and Aaron Rye over Sahith Theegala.
Yeah, so for me, listen, I'll tell you, I did just argue with my model here because I can tell you over my 36 round model, which does have, basically all 36 rounds factored in here, 34 of the 36 for Akshay Bhatia, and he was number one in my 36 round model that spit out for me. Now, am I going to say that a person can't win in back-to-back weeks? I'm not going to say that. Am I going to say that a super young guy that just got his first PGA Tour victory didn't go out and have a little fun maybe or something? I don't know.
And by the way, he's not going to win because he was a withdrawal this morning.
Okay, there it is. So
he gets his PGA Tour card and he thinks he's entitled to a week off. Come on, man.
Yeah, I was going to say and also apparently it's not the way that the tournaments worked out earlier in the year, he's not a lock to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs and all these things like that. And so there's a lot going on there. So it didn't end up on the card there. So I did start with Ludwig Aberg. And I know this is one of those guys that we don't have a ton of stats to really pull from here, but it's one of those deals where I do have looked, and for 36 holes, he has been one of the very best players on tour for the past month and a half. The problem is he's faded on the weekends, and I do look at that and say that is a little bit of an area of concern for me. But again, now I'm getting a field in which there's not a lot of guys that I'm worried about running him down and all I feel like if there is a chance for this guy to actually shine on a weekend, this could possibly be it. And I'd rather be early than late.
And by the way, not to take too much of your time here, I know we're running show. Ludwig Aberg, by the way, we talk about guys getting their PGA Tour card. He has his card through next season, 2024. He was number one on the PGA Tour U rankings. So the pressure of that is gone for this guy. Now it's just about, hey, I'm going to get a win.
And you had Lucas Glover. I also have Lucas Glover. He's inside the top 20. Talk about the top 40 that we were talking about with Eckroat. He's inside the top 20 in 80% of the stat categories that I put in this week over the last 36 and last 24 rounds. The only guy that really popped that heavily in all of those. And so, again, if you look at where he was showing up in the model compared to where the odds are next to his name, that's going to be an instant bet for me pretty much every single time. We talked about Austin Eckroat already. My last two are Kevin Yu and Peter Quest. And these are just kind of leaps of faith a little bit here because these are also guys that we don't have full real profiles for. But if you take what we do have, and certainly from the super recent form, both of these guys are long off the tee. Both of these guys are pretty accurate when it comes to the good drive percentage, and actually pretty good with the long irons with those buckets that we put in as well over that. And so I'm going to take at least a little bit of a leap of faith here. It is longer shot at 81 and 110-1 on both of those guys, but I think they played well enough to show me that I can at least hope that they get in the mix on the weekend, and then we get to do what we're talking about, which is come in and try to figure out a way to make some money. So I did take a leap of faith on those two guys in this thing. There are three guys I was considering that didn't make the card. One of these three will end up. Ryan Palmer, Will Gordon, both guys that popped really high in all of this. Now, they didn't fit every single profile that I was looking for, but I do like where Ryan Palmer and Will Gordon are. And and Wes, you can tell me whatever a Trevor Cone is.
I had him actually at the Barbasol
was showing up. I mean, all over the place. I mean, I know most of these stats are coming off Korn Ferry and all, but just popping all over the place for me. And you can get like $1 billion to 1 on him. So
he's a big hitter. Actually, had a chance to get in the playoff at the Barbasol. Missed the birdie putt on 18. Vincent Norman ended up winning that.
So I'm looking at Trevor Cone as well this week, who, if I'm going to trust these numbers, and these are the things that have worked out for us over the last several years. I mean, the model's telling me that this is one of the top 20 players in the field, according to the stats that I think that matter, right? But the odds next to his name don't necessarily dictate.
I'm waiting on some weather stuff, Matt, but I will probably be with you on Kevin Yu, at least as a first-round leader, Glover as well, and Aaron Ryan and Seth Straka.
Over on VSiN.com, you can get all of Wes's course breakdowns and, of course, all of his other plays as well. So be sure and go and check all of that out. Good luck on all your bets at the 3M Open.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.